everyone, welcome to BactoChat, where we talk about the little things. I'm Anjali.
I'm Cassidy.
And today we'll be talking about scheduling. So, scheduling is different in almost all universities, but seniors usually get the first dibs on classes, as well as honor students if your university offers that. Unfortunately, freshmen get the last choice for classes. Now, this is especially important if you are a freshman or you want to start scheduling your classes most effectively, because it is so important to work proactively rather than reactively. So keep listening, and we hope these helpful tips help you when you schedule your classes.
Thank you, Anjali. That was a very nice intro. So, I guess for this podcast, we don't really have stories for you on our scheduling experience, but we do have lots of helpful tips. Anjali, what is your favorite scheduling tip, or what is your best piece of advice for students that are just starting to schedule?
I would say starting a spreadsheet on an Excel or a Google Sheets document, or even on a piece of paper that helps you to plan out a rough schedule of your 4 years at your school. It definitely helps when you have so many things to think about and scheduling is coming up and you want to make the best choices. So I'd say starting a spreadsheet, writing down a few classes that you need to take for your major, especially gen eds or other course requirements and prerequisites that you have to take, and just kind of planning that out and see what each semester would look like so you're staying on track and you're not scheduling yourself too much and spreading yourself too thin. So I'd say a spreadsheet is one of my favorite things to do, especially when scheduling time comes around.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm very passionate about writing things down on scratch paper, personally at least, because something about when I go to do something, I feel like it needs to be extremely official and everything needs to be formatted correctly right off the bat if I'm doing it in an Excel spreadsheet or otherwise on the computer. Mm-hmm. Which is something that I will talk about later with time management in the future of our podcasts. I'm very much I need to write things down person. Like, I love lists. I love bullet points. Anything like that is my forte. So from my perspective, I just get a notebook and I write down, all of the requirements, all of the classes I want to take now and in the future, and see how that would fit in with my undergraduate career. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be something official. You don't need to stick to it. I really appreciate that you say it's going to be a rough schedule, because it never ends up the exact same.
That's true.
I'm very guilty of finding classes that I want to take last minute, or, questioning if I want to do a certificate or if I want to do a double major or something ridiculous. I'm always super interested in classes. And also things that might pop up for you could be special topics classes that you're really passionate about or interested in. If your school does that, Penn State does that. So that could also throw a wrench in your spreadsheet plans, but do not be afraid of having to change your spreadsheet.
Yes, that is so important. Going off of that, it's important to check your university's course list, or at Penn State we have an undergraduate bulletin where every class imaginable is entered on this website, and you can check the course credit, the course description, things like that, and you can see when these courses are offered, and that definitely helps if you want to schedule a special topics class and see how many credits exactly you'd be investing into that class. And it's great even if, say, you want to look for new classes, say you're bored one day and you just want to peek into some interesting classes or gen eds. That bulletin is going to be your best friend, and I've definitely been accessing the bulletin very frequently during the scheduling periods, so that's another resource that I would say you should frequent.
I absolutely agree with that. And right now, I apologize, my cat is trying to get into a cardboard box. So, I'm trying to keep her quiet. But keep in touch with that bulletin. And then, at least in my experience at Penn State, Other schools might do this differently, but at Penn State, we don't always have written down somewhere whether a course will be offered in the spring semester versus a fall semester or over the summer or all of the semesters. So that's information that might change annually or every few years. So sometimes schools don't actually put that online. So one person you can talk to for that kind of guidance is your advisor. For sure. Talk to your advisors early and often.
Absolutely.
This can be more important for certain professions and certain majors more than others, and even at certain schools it's more important to check with your advisor. It all depends how convoluted the scheduling can be at your school. I think Penn State does it pretty well. I don't have a crazy amount of scheduling problems. At least within my major, I don't. So I should specify that my department in Penn State does it very well, and then also Penn State in general does it very well.
I agree.
There are some majors that scheduling can be more of a problem for, just because certain classes are not offered every single year or every single semester, and you might have a lot of prereqs that you need for those courses. And let's say this is extremely important for example, electrical engineers at Penn State. I have a lot of electrical engineer friends for some reason, but they're always complaining about the number of prereqs they have for the classes they want to take, and how they never realized that these prereqs were things they hadn't taken. And then they get into their senior year and they're like, I need this many 400 level classes, but I really want to take this 400 level class, except I don't have any of the prereqs for it. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's the worst.
You end up having to take a class you didn't really care about in that case, or you have to sit through a class that you weren't super excited about scheduling, which could have been avoided by meeting with your advisor. So definitely meet with your advisors. It's more important for certain people than others. I don't have to meet with my advisor crazy often because the major I'm in doesn't really have that many prereqs that are specialized that I would need to go out of my way to take, or like take in a very specific order. But for example, electrical engineers do.
Yeah, I would agree. For my major, like Cassidy, I don't have to meet with an academic advisor very frequently, but I do meet with a pre-professional advisor quite regularly because I'm planning a long-term professional education as I'm planning to go to medical school. So I do meet with the pre-health office at Penn State at least once or twice a semester, just as a progress report to make sure I'm on track with what I should be learning, what I should be doing, and to plan for the future. So it depends what you want to do long term. This may not be the best resource for you, but if you want to go to grad school, law school, medical school, PA school, anything, I would definitely recommend seeking these advisors out in your university if it has them.
Again, it's more important for some people than others.
Yes.
If you're just getting your bachelor's and then going straight into industry with your STEM degree, then good on you. You don't really have to worry about requirements for a grad school necessarily or a med school. But there may be some coursework that your potential employer would like to see. So that's something you can always keep in mind. But there's not always necessarily an advisor that's going to tell you that. So you might have to do a little bit of research on what you want to do in the future. If you don't know exactly what you want to do in the future, that's completely okay. You just take the classes you want to take and then hope that you get some guidance from that. And in my case, that's kind of what I did. And I just assumed I would be doing some sort of grad school situation. But yeah, that's what I ended up choosing to do. And now I'm going to start applying for grad schools and stuff. For grad school, you don't really need to take like a very targeted exam normally, like a medical student would, or you don't need to have patient contact hours like a medical student would, or a PA student or something like that. So I've gotten away with barely meeting with an academic advisor, but I do undergraduate research, which is something that's a little bit more important for people that are looking into research grad schools, like research-oriented versus medical schools. So that's something you can keep in mind, but that doesn't necessarily have to do with scheduling, so that's something we'll talk about in another podcast.
Yes. Looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've covered advisors as much as we possibly can. Again, You may not have to meet with your advisor depending on the major and depending on what you want to do long term, but I would check in with them every now and then if you need to. But now we can shift our focus over to the actual scheduling part and maybe what you should be scheduling versus not scheduling. So Cassidy, in your opinion, do you think it's better to schedule all of your classes at once or to kind of wait it out? Or is there any advice you have about that?
Yeah, for sure. Everyone has different experiences with scheduling and ways that they like to schedule, but in my opinion, the best way to schedule your classes is overschedule instead of underscheduling, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Before the semester, you overschedule. Let's be clear, you don't overschedule yourself on purpose. Like, you don't take like 23 credits of classes on purpose. I want to say you should be overscheduling if there are some classes you're potentially interested in, but you don't know if you're going to like the professor or the content of the class, et cetera, or even if this is a very specific example, but if you're trying out for the blue band, which was an experience that I had. And as a freshman, I came in, I really wanted to be in the blue band, but I didn't know if I was going to be in the blue band. In the blue band, which is the marching band for Penn State, you spend 10 hours a week practicing, like alone, just practicing. So that's 10 hours of studying and lecture taking and lab work that goes kind of out the window, and you take all of that time and you focus it towards blue band, which is great and very exciting and good for stress relief if that's what you're into, and that's what I'm into. So in my case, I would have wanted to overschedule just in case I didn't get into the band. So instead of scheduling like the 12 credits I would want to take alongside of blue band, I would schedule the 16 credits I would take if I wasn't going to be in the blue band. So you add those extra classes, or you add those classes you would have taken if something didn't occur or something came up. So it's kind of a cushion.
Yes.
You don't get as much of that cushion being a freshman, but you do as an honors student or as a senior. You get all of the choices that you would like for scheduling. In general, that's a good practice in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. In my experience, it's been much easier to drop a class than to add a class, especially if your university offers an add drop week at the beginning of each semester where students can try out classes and add any classes or drop any classes that they may not want to take the semester, and they won't charge you, they won't penalize you in any way, as long as you configure your schedule during that week. Overscheduling has been really useful for me as my plans for the semester changes and I have to take more classes to satisfy prerequisites for classes that I want to take later. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I like that you point out the very specific, like the specifics. You have 1 week to add or drop any classes after the start of the semester. That's a specific thing to Penn State, but I'm sure other schools have add drop periods out there, so you're just going to have to ask or find out from other students or advisors what your particular college does for that. But big thing here, if you're looking at overscheduling and then dropping classes, especially at Penn State, make sure you drop that class. If you're going to drop that class, make sure you drop it within the add drop period.
Yes.
Because if you don't, you'll get a late drop, which goes on your transcript. A lot of people, when they're looking at your transcript, will see that and say, I wonder why they dropped out late. Because it doesn't say the date that you dropped it. It just says that you late dropped the class, which could come off as this student wasn't doing well in the class.
Yeah.
So they had to drop it, which may not be the case for you. So you don't want to give anybody the impression that that would be the case if you just wanted to drop the class within the first week and then you forgot. So stay on top of that.
Yes, that is so important. So yeah, definitely check with your university what the add drop policy is. Next, we can talk about gen eds, some of my favorite and least favorite classes.
Understandably so.
Gen eds can be a curse and they can be a blessing. One of the best rules of thumb, I guess, at college is don't save all of them for the very end, but don't use all of them for your freshman year. In terms of your junior and senior years, when you have to take more advanced, more specific, harder classes in your major, you don't want to take 4 or 5 very difficult classes. You want to take a few hard classes and then buffer them with 1 or 2 gen eds. And that's very helpful, so you're not just stressing yourself out.
Absolutely. But on the flip side of that, you have the situation that maybe you're thinking about other majors, or maybe you're thinking about specializations that you could use. Like, for example, if you're interested in anthropology and engineering, or if you're interested in anthropology or sociology and the more public health aspects of microbiology, maybe this is something you want to minor in or get a certificate in, or even potentially completely separately major in and leave STEM and go into a more liberal arts field. And if you don't ever take your gen eds, you're not going to realize that. So it's really helpful to learn about other majors, and you can also build in gen eds to work for your minor or certificate or double major that you're looking at. So that's the important part of don't use all of them, but also don't save all of them. You might find that later on in your coursework, there's something that you could tie into sociology. So don't use all of them at once, but also don't save all of them, because then it might be too late for you to minor in something.
Yeah, so the best thing is just to spread them out over your 4 years at your university. And again, that's where the spreadsheet kind of plays into this. You can kind of map out your gen ed courses that you have to take, and also factor in any credits that you came in with from high school. And that way, you can kind of spread it out over your 4 years, so you're not leaving it all to the end or using them all in your first few years. Another thing we should mention is professors and the recommendations that other students might give you.
Oh boy.
Cassie, you want to take this away?
Sure. So, Rate My Professor, folks. Everybody has heard of Rate My Professor. Of course, not every professor is on Rate My Professor. And I feel like a lot of students use Rate My Professor as the Bible for scheduling and looking at professors in a very specific light. But let's be honest, folks. How many good Rate My Professor reviews have you seen on professors? There's not a whole lot of people just typing out like, yeah, they were an okay professor. Or, yeah, I liked this part of their class, but yeah, this was a part that I didn't like. It's always very polarized. So there's some people that were very passionate about a specific professor, so they went on Rate My Professor and said, this professor is great, take them, they're the end-all be-all of microbiology, you need this class. And then there's other reviews that are like, I hated this professor, they're a horrible professor, they don't deserve their job. And it's like, you obviously have not taken the class yet, and you're just looking at this from an outsider perspective, trying to schedule your classes. You need to take this with a grain of salt when you see these suggestions from people, because you don't know, A, their background, B, their implicit biases, C, their studying habits. Maybe they're angry at the professor for not giving them an A, but they didn't put any work in. And then there's also the possibility that they study differently from you. So if you are a very, I take exams kind of person, like I am a good test taker, I don't like to write, then maybe you wouldn't like a certain professor that asks you to write an essay as part of their class. But if you're not a good test taker and you would love to have your microbiology professor ask you to write about your favorite bacteria, then you might enjoy a certain professor more than another just because of what their course composition was for your grading.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of hard to gauge how good a professor is based on what you see and what you hear from other students. So again, this kind of ties back into the ad drop period, but that's a great time to go and sample these classes and see how the professor is, read the syllabus, and see if their teaching style complements your learning style. So I think that's an important time to get to know a professor and get to know the class as well. So take advantage of that time.
Have you ever had any experience with either professors or classes that you took that people notoriously said they disliked or notoriously said they liked, and then you had the opposite experience?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this past year, my physics professor was supposed to be someone that everyone despised. According to Rate My Professor, they hated this guy. They were not happy with the grade they got, and were not happy with his teaching style. But I actually really liked him, and I did well in his class. Yeah, at times he was a little, I guess, not engaged with his students, but in office hours and at review sessions, he was very helpful, and I really liked him, and I liked the class too. So that's just one of many examples where my expectations turned out to be much better than what I had heard. So again, yeah, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
How about you, Cassidy?
Yes, I have definitely had some of those situations. I've also heard stories from other students that are in other departments, and I feel like this is something that really needs to be looked at. You as a student need to look internally at this, and especially if you're going out there and writing on Rate My Professor, think about this before you write that review.
Yeah.
Implicit biases is something I really want to talk about with professors and people reviewing professors. So implicit bias being something that has been so ingrained in you, or a belief that has been so ingrained in you, even a prejudice that's been so ingrained in you, that you don't even consciously think about, oh, this person's a woman, like she doesn't belong in engineering, or this person is black, how could they be so educated? These are horrible things to think. But some people have had these drilled into them, and it's way more common than you would expect.
Yeah.
And this definitely rubs off on students when they're starting to write these reviews or talk to their friends about these professors. Because I've had a friend, and I've actually had professors talk to me about this, where they are a female professor, or the student took a female professor's class, specifically in the engineering department. One of my friends mentioned that all of the reviews for this professor were so polarized towards the negative end of the spectrum, and this woman, this professor, would not give them a good grade. They expected so much out of the students, like on and on and on. And then my friend took the class, of course being terrified that he was going to get a bad grade from this class, but he had to take the class. And he came out of it saying she just didn't want to hold people's hands. She didn't want to be their mother. She wanted to be their professor, and a lot of men in engineering as students couldn't take it. That's a huge thing that people need to look internally on, and then of course a perfect example of take people's recommendations with a grain of salt. So don't let them sway you
So true.
with their implicit biases.
No, that's really important to bring up. I know some of my own friends have had issues with their professors, but that's really just their implicit biases getting the best of them. And unfortunately, that language is spread there and through word of mouth, and then that gets out of hand and oftentimes destroys a professor's reputation, which is not something that we should be doing to them. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up.
I guess to bring that to a close, if you're concerned about a class or a professor, the setup of a class, or really anything about scheduling or classes, just email the professor or email someone in your department that could help you with this, your advisor or something like that. Someone that might know the course structure or the professor better from a more professional standpoint. And they would happily talk to you about it if, you contact this professor and say, hey, I'm concerned about the setup of the class. I want to see a syllabus or something, or anything that you can tell me about this class to get me interested in it. If they don't want to talk to you or act like you're not worth their time, then that's someone you probably don't want to be your professor. Alternatively, if someone or a professor comes back very passionate and very excited, that's a great sign. So you get a lot of information out of just even emailing your professors if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out. They're there to help you.
Yes, for sure.
All right, and with that, I think that's a great place to end off. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Kovac_lab, and check out our other videos on our YouTube channel, the Kovac Lab. See you next time on BactoChat.